out. Here come former SportsCenter anchor Bob Stevens, esteemed basketball coach Rich Basirico, and Hall of Fame sportswriter Curry Kirkpatrick. And someone's going under the bus.
Oh, this might be the most anticipated show of the year because we can throw all kinds of people under the bus. I am going to try to stay out of the way because we are joined, as always, by two guys who know the inside of all of this. They know how to fill out one of these brackets. They know who's going to win. Curry Kirkpatrick, who for years and years and years and years has covered NCAA tournaments. We're going to hear all kinds of great stories about that. And Coach Rich Basirico, who has broken down the out-of-bounds plays of all 64 teams to tell you who's got the best out-of-bounds play that is going to be the deal breaker when push comes to shove. We are, of course, brought to you by Hudson's Restaurant on Hilton Head Island. It is the perfect time, with Thursday being the first day of spring, to come down and join us on Hilton Head Island and to visit Hudson's on the Docks, hudsonsonthedocks.com, their website, to get you intrigued by all of that. All right. First of all, let's talk about getting into the tournament. Curry, with his great lobbying power and the power that he has with the committee, managed to get his Tar Heels in. They have no business being in this tournament, but now that they're in it, they'll probably win a couple of games, right?
Wait a minute. Yeah, I want to get in my shtick on what happened here. I do know Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director of North Carolina, and I knew when Carolina had the lane violation against Duke and lost that game. I knew that Bubba Cunningham was going to be in a whole potload of trouble because we were going to be directly on the bubble. He's the chairman of the committee, but every year, I've always wondered about this. Every year, it's not just the chairman of the committee, but any athletic director or former has to leave the room when their team comes up for discussion. Of course, this discussion was right on the bubble of the last team, and I thought Bubba handled it. If I was voting, I'll be frank. I don't think the Tar Heels. I didn't think they get in. That 1-12 against Quad 1 really hurt them. But then there's some number called the net, the NET, which the committee now holds as their the best number to go to. And don't ask me what the net is, because Carolina ranked above West Virginia, above Indiana, above all these teams that were on the line, way above them. And I think that's the excuse they made for putting them in the tournament.
Well, do you ever think they use the eye test at all? I mean, they look at teams, which it doesn't, they say that sometimes, but it doesn't make sense. Auburn's the #1 overall seed, and they lose 3 out of the last 4 games. How is that? I mean, I know they beat all these other teams, but it's the end of the season. They always say, how you playing at the end of the season? Who's hurt? Who's able to play? Auburn loses 3 out of 4, and they're the #1 overall seed. I don't understand that at all. I really don't.
A few years ago, they came out and said the last 10 games were the most important figure they were going to look at. The last 10. That's disappeared for some reason in the last few years. Because the last 10, you're right. Florida and of course Duke would be way ahead of Auburn,
right.
Both of them.
Right.
And so would Houston. And I think you're right. As a guy that just watches games, I think the last 10 games are really important.
Sure.
Are the most important factor. The teams that's playing the best in the last 10 games. The I factor, if anybody watched the second half of North Carolina Duke, Carolina would be in the tournament. I mean, they played, the guy goes in the lane and we lose. I mean, if he stays out of the lane, we probably win the game. Of course, then I'm going under the bus to the governor of West Virginia, Governor Buffoon, or his real name is Patrick Morrissey. He came and called. He did you see the press conference he gave? He put national. He put on the podium National Corrupt Athletic Association.
Wait a minute, that's Brian
And-
Bosworth. What?
and then he started talking about Carolina getting in and what it was a he's supporting West Virginia, of course, and he called it a miscarriage of justice, robbery at the highest level. And then he went on to say that he thought it might have been payback for himself. A few years ago, as Attorney General of the state, he sued the NCAA and won over some transfer rule that they had, and he won a lawsuit. And he thought this might have been payback to him personally. I mean, this guy, somebody pointed out he should be less concerned about his team being 69th in the country and his state's health care being 48th.
And on top of that, he loses his coach. His coach,
Yeah, I was going to say,
for 1 year, gone.
Yeah, and out.
He got his payback. Yeah, Darren DeVries, who was the coach at Drake last year, came to West Virginia, got his big promotion, stays for a year, and now he's going to Indiana.
Right.
Is
year.
Bobby Knight rolling over in his grave?
I was going to ask you, Rich, what about that, and what about today? It was just announced that it's Will
Wade.
what's his name?
Wade.
Will Wade
Wade.
is going to North Carolina State. It's all done. While he's coaching his other team in the tournament. What do you think of that? Are those guys under the bus to you?
Yes. Well, I there's no way he should. I mean, if he should tell NC State, look, I will accept a job, but we're not announcing this until my season's over. How can you announce? He came out and said, well, I want my players. I'm not going to BS my players. I want them to know right where I stand. You made the tournament. You played a whole season, 30-something games. Can you not wait? Would NC State not wait for him as much as they want him? Do you see his track record when he was at LSU?
Oh, he's a primo cheater. I mean, he was fired. He was fired from LSU. They caught him talking on a wiretap about giving money to his players and giving money to a fiance of his players.
Fiance, right?
Of course, all that is legal now.
Well, that's legal now. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was just a man ahead of his time.
Right. Yeah. Exactly, Bob. Ahead of his time.
And wouldn't NC State want something like that when you're in the same state with Duke and Carolina and Wake? And you want a man that's ahead of his time.
Yeah, that's exactly probably why they hired him. They said, this guy's brilliant. Look what he did. He knew what to do.
Here's a quick story that Rick Pitino told this week. And of course, he's got St. John's as a number 2 seed, and they're in the same region as Florida as number 1. That would be a terrific Elite 8 game, wouldn't it?
Right.
But they were talking about Florida's got Florida's star guard is a guy named Walter Clayton, Jr. He made All-American. He made the first team All-American team. He started out playing for Pitino at Iona. Long time ago. He played 2 years at Iona, and he left in the portal. And they were kidding Rick the other day about losing Clayton. And Rick said, well, I mean, he said, well, I offered him 1,100 to stay. I mean, he came right out in the open. He said, the NIL, he offered him 1,100. And apparently that wasn't enough. So as I was listening to this, I was saying, well, I wonder what Walter Clayton is making at Florida that he would leave, Iona. If Rick said he offered Clayton and a couple other guys that left Iona, he had 1,100 for him. And he was laughing and joking like, there's no way they're going to stay for that. And then, of course, Pitino went in the portal himself the next year and went to St. John's for a lot more than 1,100. I bet.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think his players at St. John's are making a little more than 1,100 for sure.
Without a doubt.
The one other issue I wanted to get into, and then we'll get into the teams. With Carolina being the last team in and West Virginia maybe being the first team out or whatever, I think there are too many teams in the tournament, and yet there's a whole lot of talk about wanting to expand the field to 96 because there are, and I get the point, there are over 350 teams now. It's still a lower percentage making the playoffs than you get in any pro sport. What do you think, Curry? More teams or less?
No, it's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea. I mean, all these teams that you're adding are bad teams.
Right.
They're terrible teams. They're not going to beat anybody. I mean, there might be one Cinderella here and there, but there's some, as you say, Bob, there's some bad teams in this tournament. I mean, let's even the champions of their leagues, but they're not good teams. But that's the fairness of it. That's what makes it such a great event, that they have the winners of all these conference tournaments automatically qualify, and then they get their asses kicked and go home. But sometimes, they'll play a team off. Yeah, sometimes they'll play a team off their feet in advance. To make one more point about the selection, the Carolina selection, Bubba Cunningham came out on TV the night of selection, and he had with him Keith Gill, who was his vice chairman. And Keith Gill took over the explanation, because he took over that just the way he took over the processing of the teams when Cunningham is out of the room. And Keith Gill explained that if UAB had beaten Memphis in the finals of that tournament, the American Athletic, whatever it's called, Carolina had been out. UAB would have been in. Memphis would have been in, even though they lost, and Carolina would have been out. So Bubba Cunningham wouldn't have anything to do with that. As they're playing that UAB Memphis game.
Right.
I had no idea. Nobody had any idea that the result of that would matter whether Carolina makes it in or not. But he explained that. What Keith Gill didn't explain is that he's the commissioner of Sunbelt, but he's also a Duke guy. And so he'll be the chairman of the committee next year, Keith Gill, a Duke guy. So let's see, what happens then. I thought a Duke guy and Cunningham, a North Carolina guy, sitting with each other. They never mentioned that. That would have been funny.
Is he the vice chairman or the chairman of vice?
Come on, you sound like the West Virginia governor. Speaking of screw-ups, more screw-up. How about the NIT? How about the NIT giving a bid to, who was it, South Alabama, and then rescinding the bid because Riverside or somebody changed their mind and decided to come to the NIT. And of course, the NIT people had to apologize. The interesting thing is, the NCAA bought out the NIT a few years ago. Yeah. So the NIT people are the NCAA people. There's Danny Gavitt, who's the head of the whole thing. He had to come out and apologize for the NIT mistake. Of course, the NIT has now been scrubbed by this new tournament that Fox TV is starting, the Crown in Las Vegas, and all the teams that didn't get in the NCAA quickly went to the Crown instead of the NIT. So the NIT is just a disaster. I mean, I don't see how they can.
It's not even playing at the Garden anymore. The finals are in Butler.
Yeah,
they play the Final Four in Butler. So
the NIT actually invited South Carolina, who was 12-20. They lost 20 games.
They were last place in Southeastern Conference.
Well, they were allowed to. The rules say they can invite 2 teams from every conference that didn't get that didn't get them all their teams in, and there were only 2 teams left in the SEC that didn't get in, and one of them was South Carolina. And they, thank heavens, do not throw Lamont Paris, their coach, under the bus, because he said, all of our players have already left. I mean, we lost the first game of the tournament; they're gone. And secondly, we don't deserve it. I mean, we're just. No, that's silly. So
what's equally silly is this portal that opens Monday. By the way, the portal opens Monday. This tournament is still going on. All these players are playing, and that's one of the reasons, probably the major reason. Will Wade, for instance, has to announce, "Hey, look, he's going to tell his team, I'm going to NC State, so I'm going to try to go to the portal on Monday," which for sure he's doing. An Indiana player, Indiana's best player, by the way, Renault, a great 6'9" forward, has already left Indiana and gone to the portal. I mean, it's unbelievable. Yeah, he didn't wait. He didn't wait for DeVries or whatever his guy's name is coming from West Virginia. He's left, and I want to call. I want to call. I want to call Hubert. I want to call Hubert Davis and tell him to go get Renault. I mean, it's exactly what Carolina needs.
Right. But why can't they wait until the season?
Can they get him for next week? Yeah.
It's
Get him
unbelievable
for next
they
week.
can't move the portal.
Can he play this? Can he play this week?
It's
Yeah.
unbelievable they can't move the portal to after the tournament. I don't
I
get it.
mean, yeah. Well, how that this just makes common sense, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
here you are
yeah,
comparing your team for the NCAA players to the Sweet 16 you've won, let's say this weekend, and now you got to worry about the portal on Monday. I mean,
yeah.
that's ridiculous.
All right,
Really is.
NCAA
Well,
under
Bob,
the bus. That's an easy
Bob,
one. Yeah.
okay, I got one thing about Carolina, and under the bus to Carolina.
Yeah.
As we're blowing out San Diego State, I mean, we're up by 40 in the middle of the second half. Our mascot, Ramses, that Ram, the TV got him. He was sitting down in the stands. He was sitting down the whole time. He was bored or, working off a bender or something. But our mascot is doing nothing. And again, I thought, wow, he
Hey,
going
you're
under.
up 40. What does a mascot need
Yeah,
to do?
Well,
he's done
that's
his
true.
magic already. He's already done
That's
his
true.
magic.
That's true. So,
Enjoy
Bob,
it. Yes.
what are your picks? Let's do these.
Well,
Let's do these
let's get it.
brackets.
We're going to get into the brackets. Let's take a break right here. Good time to do it. We'll get back and we'll talk about who's going to make it
Okay.
through and end up in the Final Four. Curry Kirkpatrick, Rich Basirico. I'm Bob Stevens. More people are going under the bus when we come back. Brought to you by Hudson's on the Docks. All right, we are back. Bob Stevens along with Curry Kirkpatrick and Rich Basirico talking about the NCAA tournament. Let's start with Carolina's bracket. The South Regional, Auburn the 1 seed, Michigan State the 2 seed. I got the two of them getting into the Elite Eight. Anybody see any exciting upsets there?
Yeah, I think that region isn't all that strong. I mean, I think there's going to be some upsets. I have Yale winning in the first round,
Okay.
but I don't see any of these teams. The only team that I think that could upset someone is Creighton. I think Creighton could. They play Louisville the first round. They
Playing
they could do
Louisville.
some damage. Yeah, but outside of that, I
Yeah.
mean, you got San Diego, Iowa State, who's got the best player hurt, Marquette, Michigan. I agree with you, Bob. I think Auburn and Michigan State are the two best teams by far in that region. I don't see any
All right,
major,
with
major
Iowa
upsets.
State's best player hurt, does Carolina then beat Ole Miss, then beat Iowa State, and end up getting to play Michigan State in the Sweet 16? Curry, you're on a ride, baby.
Could happen.
Well, everybody, I want to stop at Louisville there for a second, Rich.
Yeah.
I think Louisville got really underseeded. They're an 8 seed, and
Mhm.
yet in the AC, I know the ACC was down this year, but they chased Duke all year to the number 2 in the ACC. They beat Clemson twice, and yet Clemson's a 5 seed, and
Right.
Louisville's an 8. I don't understand that. The way they seed these certain leagues. Louisville, though, does get to play in Lexington, Kentucky, an
Right.
hour away. So they're going to have a home crowd for this game against Creighton, Rich. And they're also going to have the home crowd if they play Auburn. Of course, Auburn is familiar with that court also. They crushed Kentucky on that court a few weeks ago. You mentioned Carolina and Michigan State. Everybody has Michigan State as a trendy upset to beat Auburn and go on. In my looking at it, and I don't know, I'm sentimental, but having watched Michigan all year, I love their 2 7-footers, and one of them, of course, is Danny Wolf, a transfer from Yale. I like Yale too in that first round, Rich, upsetting Texas A&M, and then they'd play Michigan. But
Yeah.
I stupidly have picked Michigan to upset Auburn and play and go all the way to the Final Four, as a matter of fact. So I don't know if that's going to happen. But every year that Carolina plays Michigan State in the tournament, we beat Izzo all the time. I know Izzo is Mr. March, but he isn't. He's Mr. March until he loses, and nobody remembers him losing all the time in March. but he's done a terrific job with this team. He's got a great young player, the son of what's his name, Jason. I can't remember. His father was on one of those championship teams.
Yeah.
Richardson,
Jason
Richardson,
yeah.
Jace Richardson, who's really terrific.
Yeah.
And Michigan State's done their usual job. They won the Big Ten regular season going away, but I saw them in Maui, and North Carolina played Michigan State in Maui and lost in overtime in the semifinals. If they hadn't lost, if Michigan State had beaten us, or if Michigan State lost in the other semifinal to Memphis, if Michigan State hadn't lost to Memphis, they'd have played Auburn in the finals in Maui. But instead, Memphis played Auburn. It's getting confusing, but the point is, we know all about Michigan State. We played them, to an overtime game in Maui. That's the upper bracket. What about going down the?
Well, wait before you leave this bracket.
Okay.
I know you got Michigan going to the Final Four. I have San Diego beating Michigan in the first round.
So do I.
There you go. A lot of people have that.
So do I.
Here's another silly upset I have.
Yeah.
I always love Marquette in this tournament because I think what's his name does a great job. I don't even know the names of these guys, but I have Marquette upsetting Michigan State in the second round. So
Okay.
I've got Izzo going out early, but that's just so I've got all these upset in that upper bracket. I think I stayed away from upsets the rest of the tournament. I've got a lot of chalk the rest of the way in this thing.
I've got
What do you think of that Western region, the one that's below the South?
Go ahead, Rich.
Florida's top seed, St. John's number 2.
I think that's the hardest region. When you look at it from top to bottom, you got Florida, St. John's, Texas Tech, and Maryland are very good. They're very good. And then you also think of these teams that are still in that bracket. Missouri, Kansas, I know is not the Kansas of past years, but still it's Kansas. Connecticut, who knows how to win. You got Drake, who a lot of people are saying they're going to upset, and Colorado State. That region by far is the hardest region. And they're going to be some upsets.
Ridiculously hard. Florida, I thought that the key there is Connecticut, seeded number 8, the champions. I'm telling you, I don't want to play them, and Florida Florida would have to play them in the second game. It's unbelievable. I was hoping Connecticut. Well, everybody knew Connecticut was being an 8, and I was hoping they were going to be an 8 in Duke's region, and Duke would have to play them because I think Connecticut would beat Duke, but now they're going to have to play Florida. What's one of the more intriguing games? It's kind of people have talked about it, but they haven't really realized how unique it is. Kansas playing Arkansas in the first round.
Yeah.
That's two Hall of Fame coaches, Calipari and Bill Self, that have quite a history. If people remember, in 2008, Calipari was coaching Memphis, and they played Self and Kansas in the final. Memphis went up by 3. Kansas has the ball, and Calipari does not foul, and he allowed the Kansas to bring the ball down and shoot a 3. The kid from Alaska, Chalmers from Alaska, shot the 3, tied the game with 2 seconds left. And Calipari, to this day, remembers he should have fouled. I mean, they'd win the game if he fouled. He didn't foul. Chalmers tied the game, and Kansas won in overtime. Then again, 4 years later, Calipari meets Self again, Kansas at Kansas, and Calipari learned something. He learned how to recruit Anthony Davis. And Davis won that game for Kentucky. So they have, it's just quite a coaching matchup in the very first round in Providence. And of course, the winner gets probably St. John's and Rick Pitino playing in Providence. And that was no accident either. Pitino starting his career in Providence, taking them to the Final Four. The NCAA has a way of creating these things. As you say, Rich, and you didn't even mention Texas Tech, which I think is really.
Texas Tech and Maryland.
Did you mention that?
Yes, Texas Tech
and Maryland. I can't believe.
I think
and
either one of
Maryland's
those
there.
teams could go to the Final Four. Texas Tech and Maryland. I would not be shocked if either one of them went to the Final Four.
Yeah, Maryland got underseeded, I think, too, even they were
That's such
4.
a hard region. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah,
And then you look
yeah.
at Duke's region, and what's the toughest team in Duke's region?
Well,
Alabama or
Memphis. So yeah,
Arizona? I
that
mean,
West is going to be
Alabama, and
topsy-turvy.
their 8-9 first game is Baylor, Mississippi State. I mean, come
yeah,
on, they don't have Connecticut there.
right.
I just was praying they were going to get Connecticut to play Duke in Providence. That would have been great. But anyway,
Is
well,
this
so
where I get?
I'm
Is this
sorry.
where I get to go on my rant about how they should, once they pick the 68 teams, put them all on a map and say the West teams go that way, the South teams go that way, the East teams go that way, and do all that, because you're right. This region is loaded, and it's loaded with a lot of Eastern teams. Florida could end up playing St. John's, the 1 and 2 seeds, in San Francisco, which is bizarre.
That is bizarre. That is bizarre. I like that idea, Bob. I think play by your region. Play
Well,
by your region.
Florida would have to play, but maybe have to play Connecticut, Maryland, and St. John's. The whole eastern corridors they're going to have to play.
Good.
But Bob, they used to
Yes.
they used to seed it like that. They used to have all the Western teams play in the West and all the Eastern teams. You remember when UCLA was winning all those titles? All they had to do was
that's when UCLA was winning.
Yeah, when UCLA was winning all the time, all they had to do was sometimes win 2 games in Pauley Pavilion, and they're in the semis of the region.
Right.
But so they
But
spread
I
it
still
all
think
out.
if you're looking at the big picture of watching the tournament, I think you need to have a national, as long as you can, have some national interest. Have a team from the West at least get into the 8, and I'm not sure I get any of them there, except if you consider Houston West. There's not much left. The power in college basketball right now is, of course, in the East.
Is the West regional final in San Francisco?
Yes.
San Francisco. Yeah.
So St. John's,
Florida and St. John's.
Florida and San Francisco.
Yeah, but
St.
but think
John's.
about that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Team from New York and team from Florida going all the way to the West Coast. I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
That's not good. Hey, let's take a quick break again, and then we'll do the other side of the bracket and get us all the way to the Final Four. You're watching and listening to Under the Bus, brought to you by Hudson's on the Docks, their website, hudsonsonthedocks.com. Welcome back to Under the Bus. Bob Stevens along with Rich Basirico and Curry Kirkpatrick. It looks like Mount St. Mary's is going to finish off American in the play-in game. So you can pencil in that big upset, Mount St. Mary's over Duke in the 116 game in Raleigh. Gee whiz, Duke has to go so far to play their first games. And then they go from there. What do you think about that East Regional that will wrap up in Newark in a couple of weeks?
First of all, I did a TV story for ESPN, a feature on Mount St. Mary's one year, because they were really good. They were really good, and they had a really good player as center. And so I got to go to Mount St. Mary's and meet the coach. The coach at that point had been there about 50 years. He was a legend, and coaching at this school for so long.
Yep. Yep.
And I remember they had a grotto. Of course, it's a Catholic school, and I did my stand up at the grotto in Mount St. Mary's. But I love doing. I used to love doing stories like that on unknown schools. And when
what was the biggest upset you ever witnessed, Curry, in that first round? Biggest crazy 15-2 or?
Well, it wasn't. I was retired. I've been retired for 100 years. But a few years ago, I was there when that team from Baltimore beat number 1 Virginia, the first 16 ever to beat a 1.
Okay.
And I remember I was there with a friend of mine. what's the name of that school? Baltimore, Maryland, something.
Right.
Oh, Baltimore County. Yeah, yeah.
UMBC or UMBC, whatever.
UMBC. Yeah.
So, and they are absolutely blowing out Virginia. And early in the second half, way too late, I figured out, we should go get T-shirts from this school because this is history. Is history. Of course, we go out and they were all sold out by then. but somehow I got one. I'm a big friend of Dave Odom, whose son Ryan Odom coached that team, that team, Baltimore team, and he coaches VCU now, and he's been talked about for one of these other big jobs.
Perfect. VCU is in this region. You got him going anywhere?
Well, yeah, and as a matter of fact, I've got him beating BYU. That's the only upset I've even got in that round. What do you think, Rich? VCU, BYU.
I think it's a really good beast. BYU has really good depth. I mean, they can play a lot of guys, and I like BYU. I like VCU too, but I think BYU is going to win that game. But again, wouldn't be shocked if VCU won that. But
BYU shoots the heck out of it, but they always come into the tournament and are eliminated early. BYU.
Except they're playing in Denver, playing at altitude and close to home. Might give them an advantage over Virginia Commonwealth. Yeah, I've got chalk here too. I've got Alabama beating Duke to go to the Final Four, but otherwise.
Wow, how about you? Look at that.
Oh,
that's great. I
love
not
that. Much of a limb.
If Nelson, the big center that got hurt in the conference tournament, if he's okay, I love that pick because Nelson took us out last year when Alabama beat us in the Sweet 16. But I've thought all year Alabama could beat Duke, but without Nelson at full strength, I'm not sure. I just want to point out, they're now, since Mount St. Mary's got in, there now is a St. Mary's and a Mount St. Mary's in the tournament.
That's
so
right.
How about that?
but the NCAA in their wisdom put them far apart in the bracket, so they wouldn't get each other then until the Elite Eight, until the trip to the Final Four.
Well,
wouldn't that be fun?
At least in the same region, so they might play each other. That'd be cool.
Did you see?
And
Did
it's
you
the
see
East region.
did you see the end of the St. Francis game last night?
Oh, what a finish!
How about that?
Rich, I want to ask you about that.
Yes, sir.
If you're coaching in that game, and the other team's got the ball at the end like they had, and they're throwing a Hail Mary pass. Right. What have you told your guys in the huddle to do on the Hail Mary pass? Try to catch it, bat it away, do what?
Well, first of all, you got to put somebody on. I didn't. They had somebody on the out of bounds, right? I mean, that's the first thing you do. Take your tallest player and put him on the baseline. That's where Rick Pitino won Kentucky and Duke, and Pitino didn't put somebody on the out of bounds, and they had a
Grant Hill. Yeah,
Grant Hill threw that line drive pass to Leitner. If they had put somebody on him, get your tallest guy. I mean, they got guys 6'10", 6'11", even if they don't play a whole lot. I mean, you practice that. Now you got to throw the ball up high, and it's, obviously sounded like a line drive. But you got to, on that situation, that's a Hubie Brown kind of play. He loved talking about that at the end of the game, throwing the home run ball. But you force them to throw it up high, and I would say you tap it away because you also have guys that trail the play who come behind the three-point line. So sometimes you catch and kick. This case, it was 3.4 seconds. The clock doesn't start until you touch the ball. But obviously, a couple of guys fell down. I mean, I'm sure you noticed that. They fell, and the guy just ended up with the ball. But I would not say tip it. I would say you got to get your hands on it and catch it. But again, if somebody gets the ball in the paint, ready to score a layup in the end of the game like that, you got to whack them. You got to make them beat you from the foul line. Then you don't want to give up an uncontested layup.
I gotta whack them.
Yeah. What
about Rich? What about if you were on offense? Have you ever used the home run play rather than a play half court?
Yes, I sure did. Yep. Actually, when my son was a senior in high school, we used it, and it worked. Because what we did was we had two guys at half court. One guy was at the foul line screening for our biggest player on the block. This way you have somebody come to the top of the key, and then you also have the guy who set the screen. The screener's got to be your biggest guy. So if the first guy doesn't catch it, if it goes too long, then the guy who screened opens up in front of the rim, and he might be able to catch it and put it up. And then the other two guys at half court, they crisscross and then behind the 3-point line. So maybe you're down 3, you might have to catch and kick back out. So yes, we've run it. Has been successful a lot. I wouldn't say a lot, but it has worked. Yes, it has worked.
How about
But
that?
St.
Good
Francis
stuff.
has a T-shirt out, Curry. Since you like T-shirts, St. Francis has a T-shirt out. NCAA playoffs. Where is St. Francis? Is on the bottom of the shirt.
Oh, is that?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Midwest bracket. Anybody got any?
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I just want to ask you: have you got? Do you think Arizona has a shot against Duke?
I don't know. Of course, everybody has a shot. You know that. There's going to be upsets that we're sitting here talking about. We're not even thinking of. Arizona, I don't. I think Duke has so much talent.
Yeah, yeah. I think Alabama's got the better chance. I think. Yeah.
And I don't. Alabama went to the Final Four last year, but I don't think they're as good as they were last year. I mean, they put a lot of points on the board, but defensively, they're not as good. Not that they were great defensively last year, but they're not as good as they were last year. So I don't have Alabama going to the Final Four. No, not
So
at
you
all.
got Duke going to the Final Four there?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I do.
Curry, you too?
Yeah, I do too. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right. I've got Bama. Let's go to the Midwest. This is where the champion is going to be crowned. Houston is going to run the table.
You think?
They're the best team. I mean,
the last 4 or 5 years, they've had really good teams, and they've only gone to the Final Four once. And
yeah,
now
but
they're
they are
saying
really
that
but they shoot the ball this year so much better than they ever have.
I agree.
The point guard that came from Oklahoma is terrific. He's new this year, but boy, is he good. And then Smart. And then they have the kid. Who's the kid that was transferred from Baylor? And he could be the first player ever to play for 2 different schools to win the championship, because he won the championship with Baylor a few years ago.
That's pretty cool.
I can't remember that. And Kelvin Sampson, really, I don't think their path is that hard, by the way.
No, yeah. Well, think about who in their bracket. I mean, Tennessee's number 2.
They've got Gonzaga. Gonzaga isn't nearly what they used to be.
Right.
Clemson, Purdue, no.
Kentucky's got players hurt. UCLA.
Kentucky's hurt.
Tennessee's our second.
Tennessee's the 2 seed, and would make them. But I don't think Tennessee matches them even in shooting. Their defense.
Bob and I agree on that one because of Rick Barnes. We're not Rick Barnes fans.
I know you hate Rick Barnes, but I think he'll get to Houston though. I think he'll.
I got him getting to the 8. Yeah, I got him getting to Houston. I think he'll beat Kentucky. Although Kentucky, I think, beat them twice during the season.
That's right. But I think that's going to be extra for them to beat Kentucky this time.
But I got Houston beating Auburn to win the whole thing. Anybody want to argue with that?
No, I wouldn't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with that at all. I think Florida, as good as they are, the thing that concerns you about them is one that all the teams in their region are, one of those teams could upset them for sure. Texas Tech could, Maryland could, St. John's could beat them. But because their coach is, he's been there 3 years. He's young. I think your coaching experience tells a lot. When I went to Division II school, St. Leo, my coach told us that when you start coaching, you start with 10 marbles in your mouth, and every year you get to take 1 marble out. So that guy at Florida, I know he came from San Francisco. He's still got 7 marbles in his mouth. Rick Pitino has no marbles in his mouth.
Well, he played in this thing. He played in this thing last year, though. And
he did. That's true. But as you go further into the tournament, the pressure comes a little bit. It gets mounts. It's a little bit tougher compared to the first 2 rounds. So
that's
who knows?
Good point about. That's
they
a
have
good point
by
about
far the most talent. By far the most talent is Florida.
That's a good point about Golden, the coach. That said, I have them winning it all. I have them beating, my Michigan choice in the semis. I have Houston beating Duke in the semis and Florida beating Houston in the final. I just watched them and they're so good. They've just, they're calling them Noah's Ark, 2 of everything. They're so deep. but it's a great point, Rich. That might be their weakest They say Florida doesn't have a weakness, but their weakness might be the inexperience of the coach.
Right. Time will tell. Definitely time will tell.
Interesting stuff. All right.
Who's the biggest? What's the biggest upset you guys have?
Well, as I told you,
let's see.
I've got Marquette beating Michigan State, and I've got Michigan going to the Final Four. So that's a pretty big upset, actually.
Yeah. How about a High Point over Purdue?
I like that. I'm there. I'm on High Point. Okay. I got them winning that one.
All right.
So
you guys will like this one. You guys will love this one. I've got Utah State beating the hated Mick Cronin of UCLA.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You don't like Mick,
I got that one too.
You don't like Mick. You want him off out of there.
So it's great. We have picked our brackets just like everybody else does. You pick the teams you like. You pick against the coaches you hate. And
there you go.
Yeah, in the end, we get to all of that. This is going to be a fun tournament, I think.
Absolutely.
I got a question for you before we go. I guess you're ready to go, Bob. But this was a question posed the other day by somebody. If you had to pick, would you pick the SEC or the field? In other words, the SEC's 14 teams or the field. Who would you pick?
The field. I always take the field in things like that. But I think the field. I mean, I picked Houston, but
you guys.
Yeah, but I also have Auburn and Florida and Alabama in the Final Four. So
I would take the field. I also would take the field too because you have Duke that can win it. You have Houston that can win it. I don't think Alabama can win it. I don't think Auburn can win it. Bruce Pearl is not a. So I mean, and then Florida because they're inexperienced with their coach. So I would definitely take the field for sure.
If Basirico doesn't hate the coach, they're too young. So he's got.
I don't hate any coaches. I'm just not a fan of them. That's all.
Those are the two things that are the least like Rich. He's not too young, and everybody loves him. So
yeah. In that bet, so I've got the SEC, and both of you guys have the field. So I don't know.
Okay.
I got another question. This is a really interesting one.
Sure.
Take out the number 1 and number 2 seeds. Take out those 8 teams.
Ooh.
What are your Final Four? What are the 4 teams? Forget the regions.
Okay,
what are the
can they come from the same region?
Yeah, different regions. Yeah.
All right. So mine would be Texas Tech, Maryland. Texas Tech, Maryland for sure. Let's see who else.
Drake, baby.
Drake, you think for the Final Four?
Drake, no, maybe not for the Final Four, but
Colorado State.
There you go.
Colorado State.
How about you, Curry?
Bob, okay, since I have Michigan, going the Final Four anyway, and they're a 5, so I have to pick them. Go. But I would agree with Rich. Maryland, Texas Tech, and my other team is the champions, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I'm telling you, if Hurley beats Florida, they might go all the way. Don't you think?
That early?
The one thing to say about Connecticut's their team compared to the last 2 years when they won national champions is their defense. They feel they're just not up to par of the 2 teams that won the national championship. They can definitely score defensively. Did you see that story on Hurley last week? Earlier this week,
the TV story.
The other
60
Hurley.
Minutes.
The TV story. Yeah.
How about his wife? They said to his wife, they said, so who's the boss at home? And she goes, I'm the boss at home. Who else? I'm the boss. She says, well, what does Danny do when he comes home? He does nothing. He steps over the garbage and doesn't even take it out. She goes, he's so helpless that when I go to Jersey City for visit my family and he has to order food over the phone, he doesn't even know how to do it. She says, it's a good thing he can coach basketball because otherwise he'd be done. He couldn't do it. She kept saying, it's a good thing he coached basketball.
That sounds real familiar, what Karen says about you. Real familiar.
Hey, Curry, tell us a story. True. Tell us a tournament story, not Final Four, but do what you just kind of asked us to do. What's one of the favorite stories that you did during this first weekend of the tournament? You said you've seen the 16-1 game. But what's one of the fun, great places you went for a first weekend game in the tournament, and a story you came out of it with?
Well, there's been so many. I'll tell you what my job used to be in this tournament. I would write the story of the weekend. So I go to the first round games, but then I go to Thursday, Friday to two different regions, and then I go to New York. I go to New York because I had to write the story, so I never see the second rounds. But some of the upset that Virginia, the Baltimore, victory over Virginia was such a shocking game because it just wasn't close. It was such a run out, and these are the defending champions, the Virginia Cavaliers, and they were just awestruck. They were just destroyed. And to watch the emotions of that game was, of course, that's only a few years ago. That's in my memory. I'll think about it. And next week is the regional. We'll have a thing. I'll think about it. Coming up. Yeah.
You didn't get the Cleveland State, Indiana.
I did. As a matter of fact, in Syracuse. And I had to write a quick story about a team I had no knowledge of whatsoever. And they had that guard. I got to look that up. What was that guard's name they had? What was his name for an animal? He had a nickname.
Matt, wasn't it Mouse or
Mouse? Yeah, Mouse McFadden.
Mouse
McFadden. Yeah.
And of course, Navy had David Robinson.
Right.
The most elegant college player of all time. And here came Cleveland State. Kevin Mackey, coached by Kevin Mackey,
that's right.
who I think ended up in prison.
Yes, he did.
He later exactly. So Bob, you got me right on it. Exactly. I remember I had to scurry around trying to follow, and of course I had to talk to Mackey about his team. I had no knowledge of this team whatsoever, and of course they were going to be. And it was a story. It wasn't. I wasn't doing the main story. Alex Wolf was doing the main story, so I had to pick out, and that was the story that came up. Of course, is Cleveland State with the Mouse McFadden.
Good stuff. Hey, mind the memory bank, because you're going to have some stories to tell next week. It'll be good stuff. Anyone else to throw under the bus?
I have one. I have the officials in the ACC tournament. Clemson is down 15 with 3 minutes and 28 seconds against Louisville. Comes back, cuts it to 2 with the ball with, I think, 21 seconds or something like that. They call a timeout, run a play, get the ball to their best player. He drives to the basket and gets hammered. I mean, he gets hit from the front, the back, and the side. No foul call. No foul. Even the announcer was saying, how can there not be a foul? How can there not be a foul? I hate when officials sit there and go, well, we want the players to decide the game. You are deciding the game when you don't make a call. You are deciding the game.
Right.
He got hammered. I mean, hammered. As you know, they replayed 15 times. How they didn't call a foul on that is beyond me. And I don't want officials to stop blowing the whistle. When there's a foul, call the foul. I told you the story when I was coaching high school basketball. Fish came to me and said, Coach, this is before the game. I just want to let you know that I'm not going to call any touch fouls tonight. I said, sir, you just said it's a foul. I said, well, yeah, but I'm not going to call any touch fouls. Well, you just said it was a foul. A foul's a foul. You got to get punched in the face to be a foul call? That's ridiculous.
That's good. That's good. I got one more under the bus.
All right.
We haven't even talked about this in tournament week. We haven't even mentioned the women. But the women has so much great publicity all season, and with all these great players, and yet what comes out of the tournament are these women bitching about their number one seeds. Their number one seeds. Yeah. The USC, Lindsay Gottlieb is bitching about this. She said she said she was disrespected because they got the 4th number one seed. And what she really means is they now have to play Connecticut in their region, and they don't want to play Connecticut in the 4th seed. That's what she really means. But I mean, the bitch about your 4th seed, and she's a number one seed, and then Dawn Staley
Yeah.
bitching that she's disrespected.
The
She's not
Number
the number
she's
one.
not
Yeah.
she's not the number one of the 4 seeds that UCLA is. I mean, come on. You talk about first world problems. I mean, and listen, so both coaches, both teams are USC, all right?
Yes.
I got a word
Yes.
for USC. Ungrateful, silly, and catty. USC. That's what that is. I mean,
Good stuff.
the women are on this great roll, and the biggest news coming out of this tournament are these 2 coaches bitching about their number 1 seeds. I thought,
Who you got
amazing.
winning the women's? Who you got
Just amazing.
winning the women's thing? Let's touch that
Connecticut
on the way out.
Connecticut.
You got Connecticut, Curry.
Yeah.
I got Caitlin Clark coming back. No. Yeah, I like Rich's pick. I think Connecticut will upset these people. Yeah.
Well, there you go. A 2 seed wins after all the 1 seeds bitch. There you go. There's your there's your payback. Until you beat Dawn Staley, you're not going to win it. So I will stick with the Gamecocks of South Carolina. Could be a great battle of the USCs for all the marbles. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it more. A lot coming up next week.
Ungrateful, silly, and catty. The battle of USCs. Yeah.
Great way to throw them under the bus to finish things off. Hey, our thanks to Justin Jarrett for putting this together. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening. We'll see you next week. Throwing people under the bus.
March Madness. Here we come.
Under the Bus is a production of the Loco Media Network and is filmed on the Hilton Head Island campus of the University of South Carolina, Beaufort. The executive producer is Justin Jarrett, with assistance from Trey Ramsey, Mahogany Hickman, and Adam Carroll.